We're out here in a little neglected corner of my yard, which basically my whole yard becomes a neglected corner from time to time. I am a working person and don't always have the time to mow. But this plant here is called shepherd's purse. And the reason it's called shepherd's purse is because what it does, it's a member of the mustard family. And so, as most mustard families do, they grow up, and as they grow they produce flowers, and then the flowers of course go to seed, and then they grow a little further and they produce more flowers, and then those become seed, and they just keep growing all season long. They're usually a very small, unobtrusive plant. Most people don't notice them, but when the seed pods come, and I'll take a picture of this because I don't know that my camera is going to get it very well, but I'll try to put it up against my finger. They get these triangular seed pods. Some people will even call them heart-shaped because they're little, especially the newer ones will have a little bit more of a dip to them. They used to be given out as Valentine's gifts because they had the heart-shaped seed pods. People thought these seed pods looked like the old purses that the shepherds used to carry on the belts, which they were wide on the top and then were more narrow on the bottom. So it was called shepherd's purse. And as I said, shepherd's purse is part of the mustard family. It has, usually comes out of a rosette with leaves that are almost dandelion-like. They're toothed. Oh, you get out of the way. There you go. There's the leaf there. And they'll start as a rosette, and then the flower stalks will come off. Again, not very tall, they're not very noticeable. But because many members of the mustard family have that wonderful peppery taste, and this is no different. It has a very peppery flavor, and you can take these seed pods, dry them, and put them through a pepper mill and use them just like pepper. I mean, that's exactly what it tastes like. So for flavoring or for food, it's an excellent flavoring, to add as a pepper. If you find yourself in a spot where you can't get a hold of pepper, you can always use this. There's pepper grass. There's many different members of the mustard family that'll give you that same peppery taste. In case you don't know, I have peacocks, and that's the peacocks yelling in the background, so in case anybody needs to know what that is. Anyway, as a medicinal, what it's known for is it's very good at constricting blood vessels. That's called being astringent. There are other herbs that have the same use. The most famous, of course, is witch hazel, but alcohol itself is a constrictor. And but what this can be used both so what it's good for is to stop bleeding. And this can be used both externally and internally to stop bleeding. If you have if you take this and you save up the seed pods, and I do all year long. I'll come out and just gather them up. Got another one over here. Usually where you find one, you find a bunch of them. And I just pick the seed pods and we just keep them. And I'll just have a little jar of them. And they dry. You dry them first, and then you just store them. And you can grind them up and stick them on anything to stop, externally, anything to stop bleeding. One thing you can stick them on is a cut, but what a lot of people use them for around here is if you're cutting your dog's toenails and you go too deep and the dog's toenail starts bleeding, sometimes it's really hard to stop the bleeding. Well, this here, you powder it up, you grind up the dried things and you stick them on. You can even ground them up fresh, and you stick it on there, and the dog's toenails will stop bleeding. It'll act as a nature's bandage, basically. But it's also good internally. Bleeding ulcers are very it's a good way to stop the bleeding from the bleeding ulcers. It doesn't have any antibiotic properties, though it is often considered to be a barrier between the wound and anything out external. Like it's not going to kill any bacteria that's already in the wound, but it does. It is considered that it will keep more bacteria from coming into the wound. So it can be used. So you can take it as to stop the bleeding of a bleeding ulcer. Heavy menstruations. It's very good for that. You can take it as a tea. Again, you can dry the entire upper part of the plant for tea. You just take the whole plant, the leaves and all, and hang it and dry it, and you can just kind of crumple it up into a little tea ball. stick that in some water and drink it, and it's very good for stopping heavy menstrual bleeding, and it's also very good at stopping after birth excessive postpartum bleeding. If you bleed a lot after you give birth, this is a good tea to drink after the birth is done. Now your duck, again, peacocks, they're in breeding, and that's their breeding cry. They think that's sexy. It's just extremely good for anything that makes you bleed. It's if you have bleeding hemorrhoids, it's good for using that both internally and externally. Your main problem that it has no really true side effects, except that the big one, one big one, and that is if you have high blood pressure, it constricts your blood vessels. It shrinks them up, and that's called being astringent. And if you have very high blood pressure, you shouldn't overuse it. So, like, if you have a heavy menstruation, you take it while you're bleeding. You don't take it and try to control the menstruation before it happens. You wait until it does, and then you take it. You don't use this as a preventative. You use it as to stop the bleeding. You don't, if you're worried that you're going to get hemorrhoids, you don't start taking this. You start taking it when you actually start bleeding. So that's the only negative against it. It can raise your blood pressure if taken for a long period of time. Not if you're just sprinkling it on your food as pepper, it's not going to do it. There's not so much of it that's going to happen. But if you continue, like say if you have heavy menstruation, so you're like, I'm just going to drink it every day just to try to keep the bleeding down, that's not good. Don't do it that way, because that can raise your blood pressure. But it does take a lot of it to raise your blood pressure. But anyway, that is shepherd's purse. It's a very excellent herb for it's a lot of times poor man's pepper is one thing it's called. It's an excellent herb for that peppery flavor, and then it is also an excellent stypic or astringent, very good at stopping bleeding, both external and internal. And it's something that most people, if you have a little neglected area in your yard, or a lot of times you'll see this, it'll push its way up through sidewalks. It's very good at finding its way into human beings' lives, and so I recommend, if you have it around, go out, pick some of this, and use it to stop any heavy bleeding. Have it around for emergencies, or if you cut your dog's or kitty's toenails, or just have it around for emergency bleeding. It's excellent for that, and a lot easier to find for most people than witch hazel out in the wild. So, shepherd's purse.